Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you so much for joining us here today for our Cisco Modeling Labs event. Today, we'll be covering the version 2.8 release. My name is Carlo Bobilas, Community Manager over on the Cisco Learning Network. If you are tuning in but have not officially registered, I do highly encourage you to do so by scanning the QR code that's on your screen. You can do that, I believe, on the top right or actually on the bottom left, or I'm sorry, bottom right. It's a good way to be notified of upcoming events, live streams, and be informed when they are available on demand. Now, I just want to cover the Q&A portion of the event. We'll be using Slido for these activities, as well as for questions you have during the live event. So one important note regarding Slido is that participation for Q&A is exclusively for the live audience. So if you are catching this session on demand at a later time, the Slido QR code might not be active, so just something to keep in mind. If you haven't done so already, you can log into Slido by scanning that QR code on the top right corner of your screen with your mobile device or by logging in directly through our live stream page. Last but not least, we'll be launching a survey at the end of this virtual event using Slido, and we would appreciate it if you could take a moment to fill it out and share with us any thoughts and feedback. So without any further delay, I'd like to introduce distinguished engineer Joe Clark to dive into our session. Joe, over to you.
Thanks, Carlo, and thank you everyone for being here. As Carlo already said, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I guess it's afternoon. It's just afternoon for me. As Carlo said, my name is Joe Clark, and with me is a distinguished panel that we will get to. And we are going to be talking all about this new CML release 2.8. We'll start out with an introduction, who we are, and what you can expect. Then I'll hand things over to our product manager to go through some of the features, just talk through them. But what would this webinar be without a live demo? And we're going to tempt fate in doing so. So a few of us are going to go through some of the features and show you why we're so excited about this 2.8 release. As Carlo mentioned, we'll be doing a Q&A through Slido. I love the fact that he said the QR code may not be active if you're watching this after the fact. It would be really cool if somehow we were able to retroactively answer questions, but that's not the case. So if you've got a question and you're live, definitely take advantage of that. And then we'll round things out with a closing statement, give you some next steps to take advantage of. Hopefully that all sounds good. So let's roll into our introductions. You have me, I'm Joe Clark. I'm not terribly interesting. The interesting people are our panel. We have representing the engineering body of the CML team, Tom Bryan and Justin Guagliata. They're going to showcase some of the cool new 2.8 features. Ramal Kocheri, he represents our support arm. You've probably, if you're a CML user already, you've probably seen him on the forums. Maybe you've opened a case with him and his team. So he's here to answer questions if there are any support related or gotchas that he and his team have run into. And you'll see him in video, our product manager, Dalton. He's trying to avoid various singularities and other galactic phenomena where he is right now. But Dalton Ortega is here to answer any product management related questions and also take us through the features that we're expecting to see in 2.8. So that takes us to our very first Slido poll. We have a QR code that you can scan, and if you scan that, you'll be dumped into Slido. You can give us some information about yourself, like your name, and then answer the question, what do you use CML for today? So we realized that the reach of this webinar was mainly to our existing users. So we assume that many, if not the overwhelming majority of you, are already CML users, and you have things that you're doing with CML. You have tasks, work that you're trying to perform. So we'd like to know, what are you using it today? And what are you using CML for today? And we'll cut over to the live Slido feed, and we'll be able to see how you're responding, and we'll spend a few minutes there seeing how things are going before we move on with the rest of the webinar. All right. So, wow, things are already rolling in here. So, some of the things I see, I recognize, and in fact, I use CML for that myself. So, obviously, simulations, that's what it is. I saw teaching come up here, flashed up, and then shrunk a little bit. Teaching is an excellent use case for CML. We have a lot of professors, actually, people teaching real. I sit in a class and I take a CML, or I take a networking course and I'm using CML for my lab work. That's fantastic. And we have CML for education for that, as well as students taking advantage of personal to be able to study on their own, to be able to internalize some of the lessons they're getting. Cert training is also something that's very popular. When I'm preparing for a certification, say around like getting to familiar or re-familiar with routing, CML is an excellent tool for that. I can set up some simple routing topologies, static routing, some IGP stuff, or I can get pretty complex with some BGP out there as well. Testing and learning seems to be the overwhelming winner so far. And yeah, it's the learning aspects of how does this concept in networking work? How does this topology work? What is this new technology I'm hearing about? Let me see if I can lab that up and get comfortable with it. And I like the use of the word testing, because you probably, or many people out there are probably using CML to prepare for tests. But one thing that we played with recently, we ran a contest where we did CCNA themed CML topologies, and we got a few entries. We got about 19 entries of people submitting topologies geared towards the CCNA. And what we did was we said we want one topology per entry that is a problem, a scenario, something that's related to the CCNA that you'd like to solve. And then the other topology that comes with the submission should be the solution. So in that aspect, we were using CML as truly a testing facility, truly something where you could test others to see how well they understood some concept. And so with the CML features like annotations, and we'll take a look at a new type of annotation today, with the lab notes feature, you can build kind of self-describing and all-encompassing testing modules within the labs, within your scenarios within CML. Let's see if there's anything else that I find unique, something that maybe I don't see all the time. Design validation, something we run into quite a bit. Playbook testing. So automation is something the CML team has really made kind of a cornerstone of their philosophy and their approach to development. CML is built API first, so that REST API underpins everything you do in the UI, and that makes for a very powerful tool in an automation framework. So if you are going to say, does this Ansible playbook, as a tangible, concrete example of playbook, does this work in the real world? You can test that directly against a CML lab or CML topology, and that same playbook could then be used in production as is with like a different inventory file. So that's absolutely a very valid, very powerful way of using CML. One more, if I can find it. Practice, yes. Test new features. Unique management behaviors. That is something I don't tend to see quite a bit. Not exactly sure what that means. I can guess. Um, uh, we see people using CML to understand how network controllers work, like, for example, how Catalyst Center might manage networks, um, down to how SNMP might behave when I'm managing a network. As well as just getting familiar with some of the new programmability features like netconf and restconf, some of those Yang-based model-driven programmability protocols. So this is good. We have a lot of different use cases. We clearly have a lot of interested users, and we're glad you're all here because we have got quite a bit of interesting new capabilities that we're folding in CML. And one thing you're going to see, and you're going to keep seeing, is we're trying to make CML fit into all of these different types of topologies and architectures that Cisco is pushing, that Cisco is releasing. So you'll find that CML will fit more perfectly or more completely into those tasks that you're trying to perform around things like testing new features and testing new architectures, and certainly learning how these architectures how these architectures work. So let's head back to the slides. We'll head back to the slides and we'll roll over into our overview. And I'll hand things over to our esteemed product manager, Dalton. Hopefully he hasn't been sucked into a quasar or anything at this point. And Dalton, can you walk us through, excellent. Can you walk us through what we've got, what we can expect with CML 2.8?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. So yeah, I'll talk about some of the new features we got coming up. First one I want to talk about is the next-gen firewall. So Cisco next-generation firewall images are now going to be included with CML. So this is the FTD, specifically Firepower Threat Defense, and the Management Control Center. FMCv. So you'll be able to use these directly out of the box, no additional licensing required. That being said, if you do have a full next-gen firewall license, you can apply that to the image in CML and unlock the more full feature set, like the strong crypto capabilities and the VPN features. So be on the lookout for that. That'll be in our kind of supplemental reference platform that you'll have to download when 2.8 is released. Next is the node resource usage, which is really helpful, especially if you're a system admin, a CML admin, and you want to see what's going on with the node resource consumption across your different users and the different labs they're working on. So you can now see, which nodes are eating up more resources, and this really ties in really well with the previous feature in 2.7 with pinning a specific node to a compute server. So if you happen to have a big beefy M7 UCS server and you wanted to put your Cat9K or XRV9K images onto that, you can see which of those nodes are actually taking up resources, and you can kind of tie these two together for a little bit more resource optimization. Oops, skipped one. LDAP improvements. So now we've made some improvements to LDAP to where you can basically add groups to CML groups, so that your users, whenever they connect for the first time, they'll actually have the right access. And again, this is for enterprise and education customers, just because they're the ones who actually set up multi-user access. And custom MAC addresses. This is a new feature that we're putting in 2.8 that's going to help with the basically make your labs more predictable, more functionable, and essentially you'll be able to customize your MAC addresses. And this is really helpful, especially if you're using nodes that are tied to licensing. If the licensing are tied to MAC addresses, you can kind of make that a little bit more easily and streamlined. This also helps with sharing labs to kind of help standardize things, and you can use this for teaching, like Joe mentioned. So if you're setting up labs and you want to share that with different users, and having these custom MAC addresses set up can help with that. And there's certain features too, like spanning tree, that will use MAC addresses for protocol negotiation. So this helps facilitate with that quite a bit. And then lastly, the kind of big change to the UI features is the smart annotations feature, which Justin's going to talk about here in a little bit. But essentially, you were taking what we had previously with annotations, like being able to create ellipses, boxes, and text, and organize your topology, and kind of expanding that and making it a little more automated. So now you'll be able to essentially tag the nodes that you're placing inside of your canvas. So for example, let's say you wanted to create like a BGP tag, and you can add that tag to your nodes, and simply with a click of a button, it'll create the annotation around that. And the cool thing about it too is it's dynamic, so that if you were to move like a node around or something like that, the annotation will still stay intact. It's not going to kind of break and make everything all crazy. So take a look at that here later on in the webinar. And with that being said, I think we're going to go back to Joe, who's going to be taking on the next-gen firewall demo.
Yep. Thanks, Dalton. I appreciate that.
And
so, yeah, I said I wasn't going to be that interesting, but I will do this one demo piece, and that is on the next gen firewall. Before I get there, Dalton mentioned you have to download this supplemental ISO to get the next gen firewall, the firepower threat defense, and the virtual firepower management console. If you're not familiar with or you haven't downloaded the supplemental ISO, um, no, I'm not muted. Oh, okay. I'm not muted at all. Can't hear me? Not muted. Now? Okay. Well, I thought I was unmuted. Okay. So, I so maybe there's some internal technical difficulties, but apparently you did hear me, so I won't repeat it all. But if you've never downloaded the supplemental ISO before, you did need it if you had the SD-WAN image, if you were doing SD-WAN before. But if you never downloaded it before, download it. This will have the firepower images on there. One of the things that we do every time, it's not just for this release. We refresh all of the versions of code we do for the other reference platforms we ship. So you'll get, even if you already have all the images you want, I encourage you to re-download the ISOs so that you get updated images. Some of the improvements, we're going to have new SD-WAN images this time. We'll have a new Catalyst 9K virtual image that is based on 1715 code. So I encourage you to go out and get those new ISOs so that you can get the new images if you'd like to be able to test out those new features. And with that, I'm going to move over to my demo here. So this is a topology I've created with the two nodes, the firepower threat defense, so the firewall itself, and the management console. So the cool thing that we've got working with both of these nodes is a day zero configuration. Meaning that you can set it up so that these things boot automatically. They get the IP address they need to have. They get a username that they need to have, like the admin password is set. And they can be set to be either managed locally, the firewall, the firepower threat defense, that is, or they can be managed by the firepower management center, which I highly recommend. It gives you that kind of additional power. So when you set this up, and to prove it's going to work, I'm just going to show you a little quick demo showing you how the whole firepower thing fits together. I've set this topology up with two servers on either side of my firewall. So we have server 0, you can see it over here, and we have server 1 over here. And then over in the firepower management console, this is a GUI application, so it's web-based. I've got that loaded up already in my browser here. You can see I've defined some policies. So Dalton mentioned you don't have to install any additional licenses in either Firepower Threat Defense or in the Management Center. You don't have to deploy any additional licenses to get quite a bit of feature functionality working. What you would need an additional license for outside of CML, this is specifically a Firepower license, is the strong crypto and the VPN support. So if you don't need VPN, and I would argue in a lab, you probably never need strong crypto. If you don't need VPN, you won't need that license. So without the license, this is something you can do. You can make it act like a packet filtering firewall. So I've set up some rules here to allow for the simple networking rules that I have. I allowed for anything that is sourced from 2000/24, the 0020/24 network to anywhere. I've allowed that. And then I've allowed for anywhere to come to .2 and .3. So this will prove that the firewall actually works, so to speak. So if I Actually ifconfig on this. So if I look at the configuration over, I want to do this on server 0. If I look at the configuration Ethernet-wise on server 0, 20.x is my internal network, 10.x is my external network. So I have this server here, server 0, configured with 10.0.0.2. And over here you saw that I had a few addresses. So I had 20.0.0.2, 20.0.0.4, 20.0.0.3 configured on, I'll click away from it, configured on server 1. So based on the policies that I've set forth, I should be able to ping 20.0.0.2 from server 0 and the 20.0.0.3 address. I should not be able to ping 20.0.0.4, even though otherwise routing, I have a default route. So if I look at on server 0, if I look at netstat -nr, I've got a default route out towards the firepower. So I should be able to ping it. But if I try .2, I can ping .2, that's in the policy. I can ping .3, that's in the policy. I can ping .4, no, I can't, because that is not in our policy. So you're able to set this up like you would in a real firepower environment, using all of the features of the management center except VPN. And again, to get this, all you need to do is download the supplemental ISO. You copy the supplemental ISO over to your CML server, CML controller, if you're doing this in a clustered environment, and then you'll have those two additional node types. You'll have the, somewhere in here, you'll have the firepower FTDv, the threat defense, and then you'll have the, somewhere else, the FMC, and then you just drag those nodes to your topology. You might notice here that the Firepower Management Center is rather hefty in terms of resources. It requires 32 gigabytes of RAM and 4 CPUs. The threat defense, the firewall itself, not so much. Still much heavier than the ASA, only 8 gig of RAM and 4 CPUs. So be aware that if you are going to deploy these, you will need the resources for them. They are virtual machines, but you do get that rather robust feature set, everything but the strong crypto and the VPN. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Tom, who's going to go through a few of these other features, demo those, before we hand things over to Justin for smart annotations. Tom.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, yeah, we're going to go through a couple of the smaller features here real quick. So we mentioned the custom MAC address. So there are a few cases where this is useful, such as pre-generating licenses. So it's right here. If you select the node, you have this sidebar, we call it, this pane with information about the node itself. In here, you can also see, say, the bootstrap config, information about the connectivity. Here on the interfaces panel, you will now be able to set this custom MAC address. So you can set the lower 3 bytes. So we'll just set a couple values here for this device so we can see them later. And I'll get this started up. You'll notice here when I'm setting those top 3 bytes, 5400, those top 3 bytes are also called the OUI. That's the same for all of your entire CML server. Normally, CML just generates MAC addresses using those 3 bytes as the high 3 bytes, and then generates a unique MAC address by assigning the lower 3 bytes. If you need to change that those upper 3 bytes, you can for the whole entire CML server, or the admin can for your CML server. There'll be instructions in the documentation for CML 2.8. That's sometimes useful if you have like other systems that are running like libvirt VMs on an external network that you want to connect to. Just making sure that they're using a different OUI for those high 3 bytes will keep them in from having MAC address clashes. But if you just need to set one for a specific device or interface, you can just pre-assign those addresses here. Like Dalton said, that's useful for if you have a VM type that you actually want to apply a license to. Often those licenses are tied to the MAC address, so assigning that helps you generate and be able to reuse that. Even if you wipe the node, that MAC address will stay the same when you relaunch the device. While this is coming up, we can look here at the nodes pane. So we mentioned that you've always had here in the nodes pane for your lab the different resource usage. So as the devices come up, usually the CPU kind of spikes, the memory starts creeping up. We've added now the disk usage here for the device. If you don't have that here, you can just check in the columns and add the disk usage to your list of columns. If you want to see which of your devices are consuming storage space. This is probably more useful. I'm logged in here as an admin, so as the administrator, I can come into the node administration page. This lets me see labs across the entire system, owned by myself, by other users. So I'm going to look at everything that's starting up or already started. So we have this IOSV lab that I'm starting up, but then the user demo here also has this an XOSV lab running. So you don't see it here, but as I said, if you've been using CML and you're upgrading, you will probably have to come in here and add these usage columns. So the current ones, the CPU and RAM, this is just sort of the nominal, like what was assigned to the virtual machine based on the node definition and the node settings. So, IOSV devices get 1 CPU, half a gig of RAM. Nexus devices, these ones are getting 2 CPUs, 12 gigabytes of RAM. But that's not really telling you how much it's using. I'm just going to kill those columns because I don't really care about that. But these usage columns are telling you what it's actually using. So, you've got the actual memory usage here. The Nexus devices do consume quite a bit. We can see the iOS devices much less. And then CPU usage. You'll see this is kind of this is related if you've looked at the CPU limiting in CML. That documentation kind of explains when we assign one CPU, you can apply limits to make sure specific devices don't go outside of a certain bounds of CPU usage. So each CPU core essentially will count as 100 points. So this is showing you those points. It gives you, as an admin, a unified way across the whole system to see how much CPU different nodes are using and can compare them to each other so that I can let me remove the RAM filter. So I can get who is actually currently the CPU hog on my system. And same thing with disk usage. If you're overflowing disk usage here, you might want to sort here by disk usage and find which devices are using the most disk. And even devices that are stopped, if they're not wiped, they might still be eating up disk space on your system. So if you're looking at do I have stop nodes that maybe I don't need anymore? They're not running, but they're consuming a lot of disk space. You can filter for those. And as Dalton said, if you've got a cluster, this is very helpful. If you've got a specific compute hosts in there, or you want to see which ones are pinned to a compute host, you can kind of do that here and add the. I'm not on a cluster right now, but you could focus in on one cluster where you're seeing a lot of resource overusage. You could find the one who's either eating up all the disk space or the CPU space, stop that node, wipe it, pin it to a different compute host where there's plenty of space. Admins can help kind of manually load balance when nodes get sort of assigned. So I'm going to go in here back to our IOSV device. So we're kind of done talking about the node pieces here. I'm just going to open up the console real quick on this IOSV device. Oops. And IP ARP. So we can see here now this device is out, this IOSV1. And remember, we set these specific MAC addresses that are showing up here, like for Ethernet interface, GIGI01 is getting the 110011 and 2 gets 220022. So we're getting those MAC addresses assigned into that device. And like I said, this is something that even if you stop the device, wipe the whole lab, those assignments will stay. So every time you boot up this node, it should get that same MAC address. Again, good for getting a stable MAC address to use when you share the lab or trying to teach something or using those licenses. The The other feature that we kind of talked about briefly, I'm not going to demo it because it's well, I don't know, a little underwhelming to demo. But in the LDAP settings, you've always been able to map in your user filters, your admin filters. In CML 2.8, we now have a group search base in addition to your user search base. You can set that so that we can pull groups from your LDAP system. And then if you go into the groups and create a group that's the same name as the CN of the group in your LDAP system, when CML logs in users, it'll scan the LDAP system, find this group, and then update its membership based on your LDAP system. So if you have a user, the first time they log in, they're not known at all to the CML system. They're coming just from their LDAP auth. You haven't had to create them on the CML side. There's a problem where it was people had to log in at least once before, as an admin, you could go and start assigning them. This lets you now do the group assignment here by saying, for the groups that I've added in CML that match my groups over on the LDAP side, go ahead and just use, say, the member of attributes on the user to assign them into groups that correspond to those LDAP groups. So we don't pull in all the LDAP groups of your whole LDAP system. You create them on the CML side. But the first time that user logs in, and even later, if you've removed a user from a group, every time they log in, their group membership in CML will be updated based on those corresponding groups in LDAP. So this is a feature I think we've had multiple of our LDAP users asking for. This will make it a little bit easier to manage those users just based on your LDAP groups. I think that's it. We just wanted to hit a couple of those small features here before we hand off to Justin, who's got, I think, something much more entertaining and a longer demo here for the big feature for CML 2.8. Justin, over to you.
Thanks, Tom. All right, so smart annotations. It's a feature I'm pretty excited about. Worked quite a bit on it, and something that we've been wanting to do for quite some time. In 2.5, we added regular annotations, and regular annotations consist of rectangles, ellipses, text, lines, and you can add those by grabbing one of the tools, dragging on the canvas, and then you have your annotation. You can move it around. The one limitation of regular annotations is you can't tie those to nodes. So if I want to have this annotation here as an example and put a node inside of that, as I move the node around, the annotation doesn't move along with it. So what we've done is we've added these smart annotations. So I'm going to go ahead and turn these on. And just a quick note here, you can turn on and off annotations globally via the settings here. Same with smart annotations. So I've kind of created the same topology or the same annotations that you have here on the right side with regular annotations with the smart annotations. It looks largely similar, but there's quite a few differences under the hood here. So if I grab one of these nodes for smart annotations and move it around, you can see the smart annotation is updated to draw around that node as it moves around. Additionally, we have the label here that's automatically added as part of the smart annotation. So we can turn that on and off. One thing here is that the way these annotations are created is via tags. So this is one of the key differences with the smart annotation. So before I showed you can draw an annotation using the toolbar. Annotations are completely different in that they're added automatically based on node tags. So node tags is something that's been around since the beginning of CML, so CML 2.0. We didn't really have a huge use for them up until we released PADI, which is adding the ports based on tags. And now we're leveraging those tags as well to draw these smart annotations. So if I wanted to add a smart annotation around, we'll say these two nodes here, IOL5 and IOL3, we can either add the tag individually by selecting the tag and typing it, which will create the annotation automatically, or we can fin select two or more nodes, and then we have this new property here, which allows us to bulk edit nodes, which is currently only used for smart annotations or for tags. But we have some ideas to add this to other properties for nodes to be able to edit those at the same time. So if I have both of those selected, I can add rip. Oops. Let me take this off. Hang on. So if I grab both of these, I can add a tag to both of them, creating the smart annotation automatically. Now, there's a couple other interesting things with smart annotations. So by default, it will draw the annotation around all the nodes with the same tag. There is a property under the smart annotations here called group by links. And if you check this, it will draw the annotation around the links for all the nodes with the same tag. So it allows you to change the way the annotations are drawn. So I'm going to turn that back on. We also have exclusion zones. So if I have a node that doesn't have any tags, let me just drag a new node here. So this node doesn't have any tags. If you drag this over a smart annotation, it'll draw an exclusion zone to indicate that this node is not part of that annotation. And if we have regular annotations over here, you can see that doesn't exist. So if I drag this over an annotation, you're not really sure if this node is supposed to be part of OSPF as an example. What else? So distance parameter. This is another interesting property of smart annotations. So instead of having to draw multiple annotations to show something that's disjointed. So for example, we have OSPF here, we have OSPF here. This could be a layer 2 domain, say VLAN 2 over here and VLAN 2 over here. If you want to show this with normal annotations, the way you would do it in 2.5 and beyond is to draw multiple annotations. With smart annotations, we can accomplish the same thing via the distance parameter. So all 5 of these nodes have the same OSPF tag on them. And right now it's showing 2 different areas because of the distance parameter. So if I increase the distance parameter, it'll draw them all as one single area. If I lower the parameter, say if I go all the way down to nothing, it'll draw 5 distinct annotations around them. And then you can find something in the middle where you arrive at what we wanted to show here, which is 2 distinct annotation areas. And finally, well, actually 2 more things. So with the smart annotations, we did add the ability here in the toolbar to disable them individually. And this is really nice if you want to give somebody a lab that has kind of multiple scenarios. So imagine you're a teacher and you want to give this to students. You could have multiple annotations created via the tags and then have them turn them on and off as they go through the lab to show different context around what the student is configuring. And then finally, I just want to point out that these annotations and smart annotations do work together. So they're not mutually exclusive. If you have an annotation and drag it over a smart annotation or vice versa, we have this layer property that allows you to bring it above or below the other type of annotation. So if I change the background so it's not transparent, we can see that dragging the layer up and down will allow you to kind of draw these on top of each other in different layers. So with that, that's everything for smart annotations, and I'll pass it back to Joe.
Thanks, Justin. That was a great demo, and it all worked. So we did live demos, and we tempted fate, and we won. Fate lost. One of the things I really like about the smart annotation feature is you demoed like EIGRP, OSPF, and the routing protocols, but because it's flexible with those tags, like you said, you could make like an OSPF 0 tag or an OSPF 1 tag, and you could get very specific to how you want your network to be laid out. So I think that part is rather phenomenal. And Tom, one of the things that I like that you said is you highlighted that disk space usage per like cluster node, and seeing what individual VMs are taking up. Just before this demo, I ran into that problem because I had an old Firepower Management Center node not booted, but it had been booted previously, and it was taking up quite a bit of disk space. So I appreciate that feature and being able to drill into things. And so those are the things I enjoy in terms of our demo. Going back to our slides, we're going to kick it over to another Slido poll, and we're going to ask, what did you enjoy? So again, scan the QR code if you're not already in Slido. And based on today's demo, what other features, first of all, what did you like? If there's something that really stood out that you think you're going to use, or what features would you like to see come in CML in a future release? So this is your opportunity both to say what you enjoy, what you think is going to be effective for how you use CML, and then what else would you like to see? Because we're not done with CML. This is the 2.8 release, but I hear there are more numbers after 8. So we'll be able to do much more with CML, but we need your feedback to make that work. So let's take a look at what people are saying. Voice, that's an interesting one. We could potentially put some call control elements within CML. And if you're, I'm sure some of you are making ample use of external connectivity. If you've got external connectivity and we did have call control elements in CML, you could use them to manage external voice elements like phones, and certainly soft phone type technology that could run, say, on the Ubuntu node. You could run that within CML. I see a wee little ice over there. One thing that we do now have in our CML community GitHub, so if we can put that link out there. So our GitHub, we have a lot of user contributed things, one of which is a node definition for ICE, which will run in CML. It does require quite a bit of resources, but we do have that, and that does work quite nicely. And one of the things that we are planning for a future release is to better integrate with that GitHub repository so that we bring in some of those third-party or those contributed node definitions. And so we'll be able to have those as kind of make them more visible with how you're using CML. I see wireless APs. I won't say too much on that, but I know that's something that Justin is passionate about, so stay tuned there. Let's see what else we got. We already FMC, so it's big. We know where it's coming in 2.8, so we're excited that you're excited about that. More labs in GitHub. Well, the contest, as I mentioned, that CCNA contest we consider successful. So we'll likely run something like that again, and we'll start to see more user-contributed labs in that GitHub repo. And if you, our audience, have any labs that you would like to contribute, you can either do a pull request if you're familiar with GitHub and you're comfortable doing that, or you can post them into our forum, into the Cisco Learning Network, and we can look to get those added as contributed labs there. And of course, we'll give you all the attribution for it. DNAC, so Catalyst Center, that is something that technically could work in CML today, but it is a beast. 256 gig of RAM, and I think 32 CPUs, plus you need SSDs for it. We recommend that you run that external to CML and you have it manage using external connectivity. You have it manage the devices within CML. So anything else? We have wireless. As I say, stay tuned there. We have some interesting things at foot. Snapshots, that's something else that we've batted around in terms of feature discussion. VPN, with a VPN, like we said earlier, VPN for firepower isn't included by default, but in general, VPN capabilities into CML would work. Things like WireGuard termination on Ubuntu nodes, VPN termination on ASA nodes, those do work within CML, and I've actually made use of them. So that is something that technically you could do today. That's pretty much stop and wipe in one go. That's something I hadn't heard. Maybe something we could consider as a time saver, so to speak. So we'll keep this running in the background. We'll collect some of these, and we'll be able to mull them over later. But let's go ahead and move into the Q&A portion of our program today. Get rid of that, and we'll go back up to the slides for a second and just kick it over to Q&A. Now, Q&A, just like everything else, is handled by Slido. So if you're not already in Slido and you would like to answer a question, please just scan that QR code, get in there, and ask the question that you would like to ask. Now, I know that there are a few questions that have already been asked, so I know that this is working. And some of the panelists have answered those questions in the background. So what I'm going to ask for is for our panelists to post any questions here, and I'll farm them out or hand them out to our panelists to answer those questions. The first two that I've got here are related to the demo I did. They're around firepower in terms of first of all, how do you get the firepower threat defense? How do you get the firepower firewall and the management center? We talked about this supplemental ISO. So with CML, when you download CML, you used to get two artifacts, two things. You got the CML, either OVA or ISO, that actually have the bits on them for being able to install CML. And then you get this other ISO we call the reference platform ISO. This is a big image, like 4 gig, maybe more, but around the DVD size. And that includes all of the reference platforms, the definitions for the virtual nodes, like the iOS-V, iOS-XE, XR, so on and so forth. It was getting so big, and we had other big types of nodes to add, like SD-WAN, that we decided to create a supplemental reference platform ISO for all these additional node types that we were starting to get. So now when you download CML, you have to download either the installer ISO or the OVA, depending on which one you want. And then there is the main reference platform ISO. And then there's this supplemental reference platform ISO. It's on that supplemental reference platform ISO that you'll find the firepower, threat defense, and the management center nodes. So if you want them, you'll have to download that supplemental ISO. And then there is a process to copy that ISO over onto the CML server, or if you have a cluster, it's the CML controller. It's the same process that you would use to copy the main reference platform ISO. The other question I was getting was, what about this VPN support in Firepower? As we mentioned, there is no VPN support out of the box with Firepower in CML, and it's because you have an eval license, essentially. If you get a specific Firepower license for VPN, you can install that into the nodes that you've brought into CML, and then you'll have VPN support in that. But if you don't need VPN support, don't worry about it. The image that you get with CML will do all the other Firepower things just fine. The last node-related question I got was around, what about third parties? Well, we talk about Cisco nodes because that's who we are, but you have the ability, any third-party virtual machine that will run within a KVM hypervisor, you can almost certainly get it to work within CML. On that GitHub, that CML community site, we have several third-party node definitions, things like JunoOS, MikroTik cloud hosted router, virtual EOS from Arista, Palo Alto firewall. So we have a lot of those third-party images out there already. And as I mentioned, in a future release, we're looking to do a tighter integration between the CML community GitHub repo and the product itself. Now I'm going to, hopefully my panel can now hear me. I'm going to or ask a few questions of my panel to get them into the mix. The first off, let's see, Tom, hopefully you can hear me. We talked a little bit about the CML community, but can you tell us more about any resources, repositories, CML labs, anything you'd like to call out maybe from a documentation standpoint that people should be aware of that can help get them started more quickly with CML?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Yes, we have the CML documentation. And that's, you should, when you purchase CML, either CML personal users should receive a email there. There's also a link in CML itself now in the recent releases. In the tools menu, there's a CML documentation that'll jump you right into the CML documentation set. In there, we have documentation about the CML product, installation, doing administration, things like setting up LDAP. But there's also, down at the bottom, a set of links to resources. And that includes things like, the video library. There's a library of videos that includes like recordings like these that we do for webinars, but we also have other ones. I know Joe's done a few nice ones on how to set up external connectors to enable trunking of connections outside of CML. There's the CML client library. So the Viral 2 client, if you're using any sort of API, if you want to do API-driven work with CML, either just spinning up and spinning down labs, or even that even supports creating labs programmatically. That's very useful if you're doing net DevOps, CI/CD. There's a link to the documentation for that client library from the main documentation. There's also a page there, I think, what do we call it? VM images for CML labs. And that goes through and gives some details about each of the different device types. We have a link there that does go out to the CML community. I don't remember, Joe, whether we've added the CCNA topologies in there yet from the contest.
They are in the community. I don't know if
Okay.
I don't know if we've linked to them from the help, but they absolutely are in the community.
So there's a contest that Joe helped organize and run and judge with topologies that were geared around the CCNA topics, and those have been added to that CML community. We also, in CML itself, if you're just looking to get a sort of functioning lab up and running right out of the box, there's some sample labs. The ones that are probably the most functional are the ones that say something feature test. So like IOSV feature test. Those are ones that we actually use in testing CML. So they have at least a partially working configuration. Often the tests involve doing things with those configs, but there are labs there for Nexus and IOSV and IOSXRV, for example. And then we have the CML now on Cisco U. There is a sort of intro to CML. If you're a first-time user and just looking to get started with CML, there's a free content on Cisco U, which is run by Learning and Certifications, the org that we're in. So that takes you through, initially kind of creating a lab, creating connections, starting that up, working with the nodes and connecting to them. And that content, like I said, is free. You just need to sign in there. You don't need to pay anything. It's part of the free content that you can go through on the site. I don't think that's linked to the documentation on the current documentation set, but we'll be adding that as we release CML 2.8.
Excellent. And thank you for mentioning that. I'd forgotten all about the training course. That's a great resource. We have time for maybe one big question, then I'll get this small little one out after that. But Justin, coming at you, I think you can hear me now. We had an excellent request in not necessarily a question, but would be nice to have the option to draw curved link lines, say by holding the control key and moving the mouse to control the arc of the line. I think that's a great idea. But in terms of a question, I don't know if you heard me when I was saying what I like about the smart annotation features. You showed OSPF, EIGRP, RIP. How granular can you get with those labels, those node tags, and how shareable are smart annotations?
So you can get as granular as you want. They're not, or they are case sensitive. So you can, have capital, lowercase. You can, put dashes. You can put pretty much anything you want, as long as they don't overlap the PADI syntax, which uses the colon syntax to specify the ports. So you can get very, very granular. And what was the second part, Joe?
The shareable, like if you wanted
shareable.
to clue me in, yeah.
Yeah, so the smart annotations are saved in, or I should say the tags and the smart annotations are both saved as part of the lab definition. So if I create a lab with multiple smart annotations and share that with somebody else, they'll be able to see those smart annotations. And the state of those is also shared. So if they're disabled or enabled, that would be another thing that would be saved. So
great. That's fantastic from a teaching. Like you were saying, you can have the professor like turn on and off things as students work through the lab. It's a very cool feature. So thank you for that. Last question, Dalton. I'm coming at you. So I love what you've shown here. Take my money. When will this be released?
Yeah, we're all engineering complete now, so really it's just waiting on the final sign off, which should be in the next few weeks. So almost here.
Okay. So maybe by the end of the month, or certainly before the holiday shutdown.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely.
Okay. Excellent. Well, with that, we're almost at the top of the hour, so I'm going to take us back to our slides and walk us through some final resources so you can stay connected with us and connected with what's happening in CML. Upcoming, right now, we have one of the developers you didn't see on the call, Ralph. He is down under in Australia at Cisco Live Melbourne. So he is espousing the wonders of CML down there, and we wish him well. So if you happen to be in the Melbourne area and you are going to go to Cisco Live, check out the Learning at Cisco or Learning and Certifications booth and say hi to Ralph for us. Most of us, I think, are going to be in Cisco Live in Amsterdam from February 9th to the 14th. And then I know I will, and I think, again, a number of us are going to be at Cisco Live in San Diego from June 8th to the 12th. And again, we'll be talking about what's new in CML then. And there's almost certainly promotions that happen, like these 50% off promotions. And even during that time, we offer discounted promotions for everyone, even if you're not at the event. So scan that QR code and you can opt in, and we'll send you updates about when and where CML is going to be talked about. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is it. Again, we appreciate you being here and joining us with our panel. We had a few glitches, but overall, I mean, the demos worked, so that's fantastic. And we got to see a lot of the new cool capabilities, new features that we're going to get in CML 2.8. And what we got out of it were some interesting feature requests for CML 2.9 and beyond. We are very interested in always continuing to keep the product evolving, keep it very relevant to what you need for your learning, for your training, for your automation, for your network simulation, and for your teaching. I love that teaching one, for your teaching purposes. So thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your week, your day, your evening, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks.